Today's idea is over 100 years old, yet it solves a problem millions of people still struggle with today. Welcome back to Smart Money Tips, where we break down timeless money principles and practical strategies that actually work. Let's get into it. Now imagine with me two people making the exact same salary. One always seems stressed about money, while the other somehow always has money in savings. They earn the same amount, but they get completely different results. Most people would assume that's because one is simply better with money. But what if the real difference is that one of them actually has a better system? Over 100 years ago, a Japanese journalist developed a budgeting method called kakebo that still has a loyal following today. And what sets it apart is that it doesn't rely on apps, spreadsheets, or complicated formulas. In fact, all you need is a notebook and a pen. When I first heard about kakebo, I dismissed it immediately. A notebook, really? But the more I learned about it, the more I realized that it isn't really a budgeting system at all. Instead, it's a decision-making system disguised as a budgeting system. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it works and why it might change the way you think about money. Now, here's the real problem. Imagine with me again that you check your bank account and you wonder, where did all my money go? Not because you bought a new car or because you took an expensive vacation, but because dozens of little purchases somehow added up to hundreds of dollars. Maybe it's coffee on the way to work, or a couple Amazon purchases you didn't really need, or DoorDash after a long day, or maybe some subscriptions you forgot about that were charging your card still. None of these purchases actually seem like a big deal on their own, but together they quietly drain your paycheck. And then what do most of us do? We download a budgeting app, or we make a spreadsheet, and we promise ourselves that the next month is going to be different. And maybe for a week or two, everything goes great. Then life gets busy, and before long, we're right back where we started. I don't think that's because people are bad with money, but instead I think it's because most budgeting systems focus on tracking the past instead of improving future decisions. By the time the app tells you where your money went, it's already gone. Now, this is where kakebo comes in. Kakebo roughly translates to household financial ledger, and it was created in Japan in 1904 by Hani Motoko, a journalist who wanted a simple way for their families to manage their finances. And what's fascinating is how little this system asks of you. All you have to do is answer 4 questions at the beginning of each month. These questions are, how much money do I have? How much do I want to save? How much am I spending? And how can I improve? And that's it. There's no complicated formulas or financial jargon. You just have to answer 4 honest questions. And at first, it almost seems too simple. But this is what surprised me. Most people never actually stop and ask themselves these questions. Money just comes in and money goes out. Kakebo forces you to interrupt that cycle. Now you might be wondering, why not just use an app? Which is a fair question. Apps are incredibly convenient, but convenience isn't always helpful when you're trying to change behavior. Think about how easy it is to tap your credit card or click buy now on Amazon. Everything about modern spending is designed to remove friction in decision making. Kakebo does the opposite by intentionally slowing you down. It does this because it is built on one core idea: awareness before action. Writing your expenses by hand isn't about nostalgia, it's about awareness. When you physically write something down, you're forced to acknowledge it. In fact, research from Princeton University shows that handwriting activates deeper cognitive processing than typing, which means you actually think harder about what you're writing down. So instead of thinking, it's only $20 before you click buy on Amazon, instead you suddenly see and think about another line filling your notebook. That pause might only last a few seconds, but sometimes a few seconds are long enough to make a better decision. Now, another reason kakebo works is because it keeps things simple. Every expense falls into one of 4 categories. The first is survival. This includes things like housing, groceries, utilities, transportation. The basic things that you genuinely need. The second category is optional. This is things like restaurants, extra shopping, entertainment, and streaming services. Things that make life more enjoyable but aren't actually essential. The third category is culture, and honestly, this might be my favorite part of the entire system. This includes books, courses, learning new skills, museum visits, anything that helps you grow as a person. Most budgets treat these as unnecessary spending, but kakebo recognizes that investing in yourself can be just as valuable as investing in your money. And finally, there's unexpected. This is stuff that you can't necessarily plan for every month. Maybe things like car repairs or medical bills, or birthday gifts, the expenses that kind of seem to appear out of nowhere. This category is important because life isn't always predictable, so your budget shouldn't pretend that it is. Now here's the secret sauce. These categories aren't actually the most important part of the system. The reflection at the end of the month is what makes the whole thing work. At the end of every month, Kakeibo asks you 4 more questions. How much did I save? How much did I spend? Did I reach my goal? And what am I going to do differently next month? Now I want you to notice what it doesn't ask. It doesn't ask whether you failed. It didn't ask if you're disciplined enough. Instead, it asks what you learned, which is a completely different mindset. Maybe your groceries cost more than you expected, or you traveled somewhere, or maybe you stress ordered DoorDash one too many times. Instead of feeling guilty, you just adjust your plan. And little by little, your budget becomes more realistic because it's based on your actual life, not an imaginary perfect version of yourself. Now, the best part of this system is you can start tonight. Pause the video right now and go grab a notebook and a pen. On one page of the notebook, write down your monthly income and then subtract your fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are things like rent, subscriptions, or insurance, anything you know that you have to pay every month. After that, decide exactly how much you want to save. Don't write save more. Instead, you got to be specific. Pick a real number, an amount that you want to save. Then on the next page, divide your spending into 4 columns. These will be the ones we talked about earlier: survival, optional, culture, and unexpected. What's important is that you must write down every purchase and assign it to the corresponding category. Then, at the end of each week, add up each category. And at the end of the month, answer those 4 reflection questions honestly. In case you forgot, here they are again. How much did I save? How much did I spend? Did I reach my goal? What am I going to do differently next month? That's the whole system. You don't need expensive software or complicated spreadsheets. All you need is awareness and consistency. When I first learned about Kakeibo, I thought the notebook was the secret. But I eventually realized that while the notebook definitely helps, the real secret is paying attention and being aware. Because financial freedom isn't built through one massive decision. It's built through hundreds of small decisions repeated over time. Maybe that's why a budgeting method created more than a century ago still feels relevant today. Not because it's revolutionary, but because human nature hasn't changed nearly as much as technology has. If you found today's video valuable, consider subscribing for more practical strategies and timeless money lessons that actually work. And remember, the goal isn't more money, the goal is more freedom. I'll see you in the next one.